cannot entertain points of order nor participate in debate.
Of the chair. Pursuant to Standing Order 1062, the chair must be a member of the government party. I am now ready to receive motions for the chair.
I'll nominate Cody Blois for chair.
It has been moved by Mr. Barlow that Mr. Blois be elected as chair of the committee. Are there any further motions? Seeing none, is it the pleasure of the committee to adopt the motion?
Agreed.
Yeah.
I declare the motion carried and Mr. Blois duly elected chair of the committee. Congratulations.
Good to see everyone online. Thank you very much to all members of the committee. And I just wanted to take an opportunity just before we get started. I know that we want to move relatively quickly today. But to all folks on the committee, what I found in my last 2 years is that we were very collaborative. The folks that are on this, that sit around this table, care about farmers. We care about those ranchers and producers and people that are literally putting food on our table. And my hope in sitting in this position is that we as a committee can continue to do that work. And I know that we will all bring our own individual perspectives and our policy positions from our respective parties, but if we can do so in a way that is respectful and tries to advance the interests of farmers, let's always have that at the heart of our discussions. And pour mes collègues francophones,
And for my Francophone colleagues, my French is not perfect, but I will try very hard for Monsieur Lehoux and Monsieur Drouin and Monsieur Perron when he's present to speak in both official languages.
Is an agreement. I invite the clerk to proceed with the election of the vice chair. Seeing general agreement, Mr. Clerk, if you could move forward with that, that would be lovely.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pursuant to Standing Order 1062, the first vice chair must be a member of the official opposition. I am now prepared to receive motions for the first vice chair.
Mr. Clerk, I would nominate John Barlow.
It has been moved by Mr. Epp that Mr. Barlow be elected as first vice chair of the committee. Are there any further motions? Seeing none, is it the pleasure of the committee to adopt the motion?
Agreed.
I declare the motion carried and Mr. Barlow duly elected first vice chair of the committee. Congratulations. Conformément.
Pursuant to Standing Order 1062, the second vice chair must be a member of an opposition party other than the official opposition. I am now prepared to receive motions for the second vice chair. Mr. Drouin, I would like to nominate Yves Perron. It has been moved by Mr. Drouin that Mr. Perron be elected as second vice chair of the committee. Are there any further motions? Seeing none, is it the will of the committee to adopt the motion? I declare the motion adopted and Mr. Perron duly elected second vice chair of the committee.
Mr. McGregor, welcome. Great to see you here. And to all our folks, welcome to the first meeting of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food. Mr. Steinley, over to you.
I'd like to move unanimous consent that we proceed through the bells.
Any comments on that? I see some thumbs up or, yep. Okay, happy to continue to move forward. Thank you, Mr. Steinley. As we know, today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of November 25th, 2021. So members are attending in Zoom and they're also here physically in this room. Regarding the speaking list, the committee clerk and I will do our best as we can to try to maintain a speaking order by watching the screens and watching all of you here in the room. So please just raise your hand on the screen. I do see Mr. Drouin. If you'd like to intervene, Mr. Drouin.
Well, Mr. Chair, I just want to make sure that I was going to read some of these routine motion that we need to for a committee to operate. So if you'll provide me with indulgence, and if my committee members will provide me that time, I will read those into the record. And then what I suggest, if there's no objection, then we can simply pass one motion as opposed to adopting each individual motions within the routine motions. Does that make sense?
Mr. Drouin, happy to do that and happy to entertain that. Just so I stay on the good terms with my clerk here beside me, I want to make sure that I just remind folks, of course, about the COVID situation. Masks on if you're not speaking. So thank you to those and just follow proper COVID protocol when we're in this room. So other than that, yes, Mr. Drouin, I think you have the floor to move forward.
Great. So first motion, which relates to analyst services, that the committee retain as needed and at the discretion of the chair the services of one or more analysts from the Library of Parliament to assist it in its work. Subcommittee on Agenda and Procedure, that the subcommittee on agenda and procedure be established and be composed of 5 members, the chair, 1 member from each recognized party, and that the subcommittee work in a spirit of collaboration. Meeting without a quorum, that the chair be authorized to hold meetings to receive evidence and to have the evidence published when a quorum is not present, provided that at least 4 members are present, including 2 members of the opposition parties and 2 members of the governing party. But when traveling outside the parliamentary precinct, that the meeting begin after 15 minutes, regardless of members present. Time for opening remarks and questioning of witnesses, that witnesses be given 5 minutes for their opening statements, that whenever possible, witnesses provide the committee with their opening statement 72 hours in advance, that at the discretion of the chair, during the questioning of witnesses, there be allocated, sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm going blind almost. I can't read. That allocated is minutes for the first questioning of each party as follows for the first round. Conservative Party, Liberal Party, Bloc Québécois, New Democratic Party. For the second round and subsequent round, the order and time for questioning be as follows. Conservative Party, 5 minutes. Liberal Party, 5 minutes. Bloc Québécois, 2.5 minutes. New Democratic Party, 2.5 minutes. Conservative Party, 5 minutes. Liberal Party, 5 minutes. Document distribution, that only the clerk of the committee be authorized to distribute documents to members of the committee, provided the document are in both official language, and that witnesses be advised accordingly. Working meals, that the clerk of the committee, at the discretion of the chair, be authorized to make the necessary arrangement to provide working meals for the committee and its subcommittee. Travel accommodations and living expenses of witnesses, that if requested, reasonable travel accommodation and living expenses be reimbursed to witnesses not exceeding 2 representatives per organization, and that in exceptional circumstances, payment for more representative be made at the discretion of the chair. Access to camera meetings, that unless otherwise ordered, each committee members be allowed to be accompanied by 1 staff member at in-camera meetings, and that 1 additional person from each House officer's office be allowed to be present. Transcripts of in-camera meetings, that 1 copy of the transcript of each in-camera meetings be kept in the committee clerk's office for consultant by members of the committee or by their staff, and that the analysts assigned to the committee also have access to in-camera transcript. Notice of motions, that a 48-hour notice interpreted as 2 nights be required for any substantive motions to be moved in committee unless the substantive motion relates directly to businesses that the then under consideration, provided that A, the notice be filed with the clerk of the committee no later than 4 p.m. from Monday to Friday. B, the motion be distributed to members and the offices of the whip of each recognized party in both official languages by the clerk on the same day the said notice was transmitted, if it was received no later than the deadline hour. C, notices received after the deadline hour on non-business days be deemed to have been received during the next business day, and that when the committee is holding meetings outside the parliamentary precinct, no substantive motion may be moved. Orders of reference from the House respecting bills, that in relation to orders of reference from the House respecting bills, A, the clerk of the committee shall, upon the committee receiving such an order of reference, write to each member who is not a member of a caucus represented on the committee to invite those members to file with the clerk of the committee in both official language any amendments to the bill which is the subject of the said order, which they would suggest that the committee consider. B, suggested amendment filed pursuant to paragraph A at least 48 hours prior to the start of clause-by-clause consideration of the bill to which the amendment relates shall be deemed to be proposed during the said consideration, provided that the committee may, by motion, vary this deadline in respect of a given bill. And C, during the clause-by-clause consideration of a bill, the chair shall allow a member who filed suggested amendment pursuant to paragraph A an opportunity to make brief representation in support of them. Technical test for witnesses, that the clerk inform each witness who is to appear before the committee that the House Administration Support Team must conduct technical tests to check the connectivity and the equipment used to ensure the best possible sound quality, and that the chair advise the committee at the start of each meeting of any witness who did not perform the required technical tests. Linguistic review, that all documents submitted for committee business that do not come from a federal department member's office or that have not been translated by the Translation Bureau be sent for prior linguistic review by the Translation Bureau before being distributed to members. That would be it, Mr. Chair.
Well done. Well done. Folks, are we all in agreement in that? Can I seek a unanimous consent? Yep. Yep.
Yes.
Mr. Clerk? Good. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Drouin. Mr. Barlow. And
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just would like to put a notice of motion or motion on the floor for hopefully would be a brief discussion. Sorry. My motion would read as follows, Mr. Chair, and I know I've had discussions with all of the parties on this, so I don't suspect this will be a difficult discussion, but my motion is that the committee hold a 3-hour meeting by December 22nd, 2021, to hear one panel on the extreme flooding and landslides in the province of British Columbia for the first hour with the following witnesses: officials from the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food and officials from the Department of Public Safety. And one panel on the interim suspension of certification of all potatoes originating from Prince Edward Island to the United States with the following witnesses: officials from the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, the Premier of Prince Edward Island and the Minister of Agriculture and Land, and the PEI Potato Board. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess the reason I'm putting that motion forward is obviously two of the most significant issues facing Canadian agriculture at this time. Certainly, we're not asking the Minister to be here, it's just simply the officials to get a better understanding the impact that the floods have had on BC agriculture, what sort of assistance is needed. Certainly want to see what we can do to help there and just have a better understanding of probably the longer term consequences. And certainly on the second one, as you were saying, Chair, about the importance of supporting our farmers. And I would just like to, certainly a better understanding on the decision-making process that went behind this ban, but certainly maybe what the CFIA and their discussions with the USDA, what is the USDA looking for to lift that ban? Like, what are the metrics or the bar that must be met, and are we close, or what is the timeline around that? Certainly, why this one is important is, as I know the Chair would certainly know, that the potatoes are perishable. We have until the end of January when they will have to make a very hard decision, either to be able to open this market or having to start destroying product, which I know is heartbreaking for those farmers. So That is the reasoning for this motion. I would certainly hope we have everyone's support to do this sometime next week. I know it's a break week, but I do see this as being quite timely and not something we can wait until the end of January, early February to discuss. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Barlow. Discussion, I see Mr. Turnbull has his hand up. Oh, Mr. Perron, would you like to speak? I know you had your hand up. Okay. Okay. Mr. Turnbull.
Thank you, and congratulations to the chair on your appointment and election. I'm very encouraged to see you up there and guiding us through this committee business. I don't doubt the gravity of the situation with PEI potatoes and the importance of the topic. I do have some concerns that I need to express just based on the timelines. I think we're talking about officials. I think I haven't seen the motion in writing, but it sounds like we've got quite a list of individuals that Mr. Barlow would like to have appear before December 22nd, which is pretty short notice given the date today is the 16th of December. So I'm not sure how realistic that is, to be honest. So I would just say I wanted to express some concern related to that. Also, normally our meetings are 2 hours, is my understanding. So I guess why the 3-hour meeting? Why the short notice? And why the 22nd of December? So I would just maybe ask Mr. Barlow if he'd be willing to clarify for the committee. Thanks.
Mr. Barlow, yes, you can clarify, Mr. Turnbull, but also the clerk has asked me to make sure that you're moving this motion such that it's not a notice of motion. You're formally moving it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
This is the problem with masks and glasses.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Turnbull.
Yes. I believe when Mr. Barlow introduced the motion, he did say it was on notice. But so now my understanding is that this motion is actually being moved today. Is that right?
My understanding from Mr. Barlow that was the intention. Yes.
But certainly, Mr. Chair, wasn't what Mr. Barlow said when he read the motion. It was that he was putting it on notice. So just to clarify, it is being moved today, and that's the intention. Okay, I appreciate that, and I hope that maybe Mr. Barlow will provide some rationale for why the 22nd and why a 3-hour meeting.
I'm going to use my discretion. Mr. Barlow, if you could, because there are other folks that have their hand, if you could quickly respond, and then we're going to go to our next folks that want to intervene.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I think I was pretty clear in my discussion is that this is extremely timely in that potatoes are perishable. We don't meet again we're not back until January 27th. At that point, it's too late to have this discussion and find out what's going on. And why the 22nd? I do believe that these are professional bureaucrats, and a week is plenty of time to prepare, an hour presentation. And the reason it is 3 hours over instead of 2 is just trying to get 2 issues done in one meeting. That is why I put the motion forward as it is.
Go to on my list. I have Mr. Drouin, Ms. Roy, and then.
Merci, Monsieur Barlow. Oui, bien sûr, il y a urgence. Je me demandais, est-ce que on peut avoir un peu de souplesse? Je suis désolé, Monsieur Drouin. Yeah.
Is coming in on the French channel, and the French translation is coming in on the English. Maybe you can go ahead, and we'll just make sure that gets squared up. Okay, it's
Testing,
good.
testing,
It's good.
1, 2. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Just for Mr. Barlow, I understand the sense of urgency, but putting an artificial date, this is a date that with no consult. So I'd just like the opportunity to go back and see if we can make it happen. And I know while we're in the midst of this crisis, I just don't know now. I'm sure we can get a briefing at some point. But while our officials are dealing with the situation in BC, I don't know if it's the right time to get them in front of our committee right now. But we can certainly, I would just like to get some time to go back and see if that can happen before December 22nd, or if we can be a bit more reasonable and at least extend the timeline so we so we can get to somewhere that we can work with, because that's pretty it's just dropped. We're just made aware of this today in terms of the timeline, and on top of that, we're dealing with 2 emergency issues. So just that question would be, I'm wondering if Mr. Barlow has some leeway on his motion, or is he dead set on that?
Do you want to opine?
Yeah, sorry, this is taking a bit longer, but in all fairness, I did have discussions with all the parties that this was going to be a motion for a meeting next week. It didn't seem to be a problem at all when we had earlier discussions this week. So I'm a bit surprised that this is all of a sudden now a concern, but I was trying to get this done before Christmas, understanding everybody's Christmas plans and not trying to put this over into Christmas and the New Year's was why another part of the reason for the 22nd. Certainly, I think there's some leeway. Maybe on the BC issue, we could have some leeway on that. But I think with the potato issue and understanding again, this is a timely situation in terms of the perishability of this product. So I don't think there's a lot of leeway on the potato issue. And again, I think these are professional employees with the CFIA and Agri-Food or Agriculture and Ag Canada. They are more. I would hope they have this information at their fingertips on what's going on to give us an update.
I want to go to Ms. Taylor, and then I have Mr. McGregor, and then I'm going to have to refer to my clerk on whether it was Mr. Epp or Mr. Lewis. So, Ms. Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and congratulations on your election. I'm, as you all know, a new member and a new member of Parliament, new member of the committee and of Parliament, and I just had a couple of questions about this notice of motion. I just received the email with the wording of the notice of motion. Is it customary to get the notice of motion at the meeting? Okay. Or I heard you say, Mr. Barlow, that you had spoken to people in advance on this, and I'm just curious whether I missed something or whether this had been sent out in advance. That's my first question. Secondly, again, excuse my ignorance as I'm new, but I'm wondering what an official from the Department of Public Safety has to do with our committee. I understand agriculture and agri-food. And thirdly, I'm just wondering about I don't know if it's the need or the wisdom of having the Premier and the Minister of Agriculture from Prince Edward Island come at this stage. I'm expecting that the officials from the Departure of Agriculture and Agri-Food and the Potato Board would have all of the pertinent information that we would require as a committee on agriculture and agri-food. But once again, I'm very new to this, so these are all just questions that I'm wondering about process and procedure and who the committee normally calls as witnesses. And the last thing I'd like to say is that it does seem a lot to try and get a 3-hour meeting by December 22nd. And I'm wondering whether it makes sense to have these combined. These issues are quite different and quite separate, and both of them to me seem to be very important and involved. So would appreciate your comments on that, please.
Well, I'm going to go to Mr. McGregor because he's been up, and then I have on my list Mr. Lewis, Mr. Parent, and Mr. Epp, but we do need to be mindful of the time, so Mr. McGregor.
Thanks, sir. I'll be brief. So just a couple of points. First of all, the clerk was unable to receive any notices of a motion because the committee was not duly constructed. So that's why Mr. Barlow is moving ahead with it right now. Second of all, I've been a member of this committee now for 4 years. Every time we've passed a motion for study, we usually start with departmental officials the very next meeting. So usually if we meet on a Tuesday, they appear on a Thursday. So we're meeting on a Thursday now. We're asking for a meeting, I think, Tuesday next week. And you'll notice, colleagues, that the motion refers to officials. We're not specifying a position. We're asking for officials. We all know that this department is large. It's staffed with very capable people who have a lot of knowledge on these subjects, and they're perfectly capable of finding people on that short notice to appear before this committee. It's a regular order of business. It's been done this way for 4 years. So I'll just leave it at that. I think, Chair, if we can, let's just get to a vote because I think these are pressing issues.
Mr. McGregor, I certainly want to recognize that there's folks that had their hand up. So I would like to go to Mr. Perron and then afterwards Mr. Lewis. And we do need to be mindful of the time here. Thank you.
Oui. Merci, Monsieur le Président. Félicitations pour votre élection.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and congratulations on being elected. I missed the beginning. My point is that I'm in agreement with the motion. If it's a problem for some members, we might do it early in January. I know that Conservatives are moving it. I'm ready to pass it. I'm ready to agree.
Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Part of my question was already answered. Just in the waiting in the queue was originally I did not have access to the motion being online right now, but I do have it now. I just wanted to, I do read it as it is inviting the Premier of Prince Edward Island and his Minister of Agriculture and Land is on there. But I just wanted to know, moving forward, what is the process for people? If some people are virtual, some people are in house. When we're tabling a motion, how soon can we expect to get this? So something as important as this, we want time to read it as it comes in. So I was looking for a bit of clarity from you, just off the top of our session here. Thank you.
I want to go to, I see two more hands, so I'm going to go to Mr. Turnbull and then Mr. Drouin, and then Mr. Epp. My apologies. It was Mr. Epp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My own farm experienced a loss of $400,000 due to a bankruptcy in 2016. I can speak to the personal effect mentally on family, both the short term and the longer, and so I would call for a vote. There is a time urgency that we're all aware of the mental health aspects across agriculture, all the stresses. Can you just imagine what these folks are experiencing in PEI? So I would call for the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Epp. Let's go to Mr. Turnbull and then to Mr. Drouin.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just also wanted to weigh in here and appreciate all my colleagues' comments on this. And definitely...
Point of order, Chair. The member did call for the vote, so I think you do have to call the vote.
I'll consult with the clerk.
Can I speak to that point of order, Mr. Chair?
Explain that on a technical perspective. I'm happy to. My understanding from the clerk is that it's not a superseding motion in calling for a vote, and so long as that there's individuals that want to speak to it, that I have that discretion. So, and I want to be mindful of the time, so I'm going to go to Mr. Turnbull. We know that this is important. I think all members agree. My hope is, as your chair, is that we can find a way to be able to make this work. We certainly heard from the committee members. We've heard some of the concerns from those that have spoke already. Perhaps there's a way we can find a way to get this done. But Mr. Turnbull.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to this and express just a few of the concerns that that are coming up for me with regard to this. I deeply feel and understand the need to study this. What I'm questioning is, we haven't had much notice on this. Normally, in terms of a witness list and planning a meeting as important as this, I would think we'd have a little bit more lead time to give not just the people in the departments, but even our clerk and others to organize the witnesses and invite those witnesses, many of whom may not be available with such short notice, the Omicron variant wreaking havoc, and quite a few other duties that they have. So I'm just anticipating that this might be present some logistical challenges to actually making happen as early as next Tuesday. We also all parties normally have an opportunity to weigh in on what witnesses that we'd like to have come before the committee. And we haven't had an opportunity to do that. I met with Premier King when he was on the Hill and talked to him about the potato issue that, certainly is of concern to all of us, and showed my support. And I'm sure many other members did as well. But I think it's important for us to have a proper witness list, for all parties to actually submit those witnesses, and for us to undertake a study with some real intentionality to the design of how we're going to undertake it, not just sort of wing it at the last minute here when we weren't anticipating this. So I certainly was never consulted on the fact that this motion was going to be moved today. It certainly is something that I take very seriously. Someone having worked on sustainable food systems and understanding supply chains and how vulnerable they are, and these international trade relationships that can be so concerning. I think we've got an opportunity to do some good, deep, meaningful work here, but we can't do it with no notice and with no proper consultation on what witnesses we'd like to see come before the committee.
Mr. Turnbull, I have to interrupt you. We're getting close on time here with 4 minutes. The clerk has certainly advised me to under 5 minutes. The normal protocol is to ask committee members if we want to continue after the 10-minute period for voting is over. I presume that is the case, but I don't want to presume as your chair. So I'll ask this committee. I would move to suspend, and I would ask that ask whether or not you would want to come back after the vote, which I presume we do. Yep. Okay. We'll move to suspend. Mr. Clerk, if you can keep a speaking order, and we'll continue immediately after the votes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Like to proceed, or if you want to, it's up to you. Over to you.
I think I was finished, Mr. Chair. Thanks very much.
Okay. I have Mr. Drouin, if you'd like to go. I think you were next on the list.
Mr. Chair, in the spirit of cooperation, I will cede my time for Mr. Barlow at some point. We have had some discussions.
Mr. Barlow.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And in the spirit of the season, in the spirit of giving, I will withdraw my motion and replace that with a gentleman's agreement, which I trust that we will all abide by, that we have come to an agreement that we will have a briefing on or before December 22nd, the 2-hour meeting, invite officials from the Department of Agriculture and Agri-Food, Canadian Food Inspection Agency, the PEI Potato Board, and a representative of the Minister of Agriculture or the PEI government, whoever they feel is able to attend. And again, this is an invitation. If they cannot attend, we'll try and work around it. And then we will have a discussion on the BC issue as a subcommittee sometime in the new year.
The clerk, of course, has informed me that we need a unanimous consent for Mr. Barlow to withdraw his motion. I don't foresee that being a problem, but I'm going to quickly ask. Good. Okay. And we're going to move forward. Mr. Clerk, I don't think we require a vote. As Mr. Barlow said, it was an arranged conversation, but just in case we're all on board, I'll ask for unanimous consent to Mr. Barlow's motion. We're good? Okay. Passed. One thing that I was not able to do earlier was introduce our analyst, and I'm going to give that opportunity. I think it was Dave, was it not? Dan, sorry. Dan, over to you.
Dan's got a beard. I didn't even notice.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Bonjour, je m'appelle Dan Farrelly. Je suis analyste avec les bibliothèques du Parlement.
Hello, I am with the Library of Parliament. I am an analyst. The person who was assigned to this committee cannot be with us today. Our work in the committee is part of the library's mandate. We do research and analysis, independently so, based on evidence-based research, and we help parliamentarians.
Say that never hesitate, please, the members and their staff to contact us with any questions you may have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Analyst. Mr. Clerk, I don't know if you had the opportunity. I know some of our members were coming from the House. Perhaps you'd like to just briefly introduce yourself so that all the members certainly know who you are.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Benoit Jolicoeur. I am clerk of the committee. I was previously clerk of the Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs. So it's a pleasure for me to work with you here at the Agriculture Committee. And likewise, if any questions you may have, member staff, please do not hesitate. I'm always there at the service of the committee. Thank you.
Okay. Folks, sorry, I've got Mr. Lehoux, suivi par Monsieur Perron.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'd like to congratulate you on your nomination and election. You can count on our cooperation. I'd like to ask for unanimous consent for the following motion, which I will read. It's a very friendly motion, but very important in order to close the circle. And it has to do with the last Parliament. The motion reads as follows: that the fourth report of the Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food of the 43rd Parliament, second session, which is entitled Growth Opportunities, Strengthening Food Processing in Canada in order to ensure food security and exports. We'd like it to be adopted as a report of the committee in the present session of Parliament, and we'd like the chair to be empowered to table the report in Parliament. It's the last report we had on our processing capacity. It's a report we worked on and tabled. We'd like to go a little further, so I would ask for unanimous consent to go forward.
Monsieur Drouin.
Mr. Drouin. Mr. Perron. Do you have another motion? Mr. Drouin, with respect to the motion now on the table. Thank you very much, sir, for your motion. I agree with it. On the other hand, I know that the report was finished. We hadn't had the opportunity to do absolutely everything because we went to an election. But I have a question. Do you think that we might have a broader conversation, because we know there are supply issues, and this report might need to be informed by that if ever the committee decided to look at supply chain issues in depth, or if you would like to have it adopted and we can ask the government to respond. I have no problem with it. We have no problem with it. Well, I'd like to see it tabled. I'd like the 44th Parliament to get it. I'd like it to be tabled with the minister as soon as possible, because you have to understand that our processing capacity within the context of a pandemic is still facing a lot of problems in Quebec and in Canada. So I really want this to be tabled. And as for the future, we'll see, but I'd like to see it tabled as soon as possible.
Let's go to Mr. Turnbull.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to Mr. Perron for putting this forward. I was just wondering whether we could receive this this motion in writing. I'd actually like to read it. I don't know whether it's me or whether other members feel the same way, but I find when you get these motions moved in committee, it's really nice to see them in their written form as well. So I don't know if the clerk could send that around, but that would be really helpful, just to have a read through and consider the full breadth of it. I didn't quite catch all of the details when Mr. Perron read it. It might have been the echo in the room as well with the translation, but I'd be happy to review it. Thanks.
It's Mr. Lehoux. I know it might be confusing for those virtually. I think it is a good point to consider that we do have some new members. In terms of that, that's something to consider on that side. I'm going to go to Ms. Roy, and I'll let Mr. Lehoux consider whether or not that's something he would allow for the members to read it or review and then perhaps be tabled. I'm not sure, but I'll go to Ms. Taylor, or Ms. Roy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is actually Taylor Roy. Both of them are part of my my full name, and I just wanted to say that as a new member, I would at the very least abstain, because I have not read this report. I don't know anything about it, and for me then to vote to have it tabled seems a little premature. So, in addition to the motion, I would actually like to be able to review the report if it's coming from this committee of this session now. Thank you.
Monsieur Lehoux.
Ma réflexion, Monsieur le Président.
Well, what I think, Mr. Chair, is that we've done a great deal of work. We did a lot of work last year So it's sort of been caught congested with other things, but given the number of witnesses we listened to, I don't think we should have to restart the whole thing. I think we have to be aware of the situation on the ground now with respect to processing. It's a report, and the notice of motion that I'm giving you today is that the report be tabled in committee, and I'd like colleagues to take the time to read it. I have no problem with that. But what I'd like to see is that this be done as soon as possible, because this is really urgent on the ground, the whole issue of processing.
Mr. McGregor, and then if there's no other comments, we can move to see if there's consent or how best to move forward.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just maybe for the benefit of Ms. Taylor-Roy and Mr. Turnbull, I can assure them that the committee and the 43rd Parliament did some very important and dedicated work on this report. We all went through it together, Liberal members, Conservative members, Bloc Québécois, and we all came to a consensus. There were no dissenting reports because we all felt it accurately reflected what we had heard in testimony. All my Conservative colleague is trying to do is to retable a report that was tabled with the full support of the committee, and we're trying to do so to get the government to respond to some very important recommendations. So if that helps put some of my newer colleagues' minds at ease, that's what we're simply trying to do. I can assure you that the report was adopted unanimously by all members of the committee in the previous Parliament.
Thank you, Mr. McGregor. Seeing no other discussion, if there's unanimous consent to move forward with Mr. Liu's motion on the floor. Mr. Cork, I believe we have. Thank you, Monsieur Liu. Monsieur Parent.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and congratulations, Mr. Liu, for the motion. I think it's important that it to be carried. I'd like to table a notice of a group of motions. The clerk, the last time, has them, and will be able to get them to all members. I also have a copy in both official languages, which has been translated, so I'm happy to have it circulated. We can start like this. So I'd like you to read it, and if you give me leave. There's the French issue to practice your French. The French version, rather. I'm just waiting for them to be handed out.
Donc, est-ce que tout le monde a...
Does everyone have a copy? So I will read it quickly, Mr. Chairman. It is a group of 4 motions. The first, motion number 1, is that the Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food resume its study on the environmental contribution of agriculture that it undertake during the second session of the 43rd Parliament, that the committee continue to hear witnesses as agreed to in the original motion and finalise its report, and that all previously provided testimony and documents be considered by the committee as needed during the current session. That's the first. Second motion, which is a CUSMA update, that pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the Standing Committee on Agriculture and Agri-Food assessed the impacts of the first year of implementation of the Canada-United States-Mexico Agreement on the agriculture and agri-food sector by hearing from witnesses over a period of no fewer than 5 meetings, and report its findings and recommendations to the House. 3. Reciprocity of standards. That pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee undertake a study on reciprocity of standards labeling, and traceability of food products entering Canada to determine whether standards and regulations on food products imported and sold in Canada are met and enforced appropriately, that the committee hold at least 6 meetings on the matter, and that the committee report on its findings and recommendations to the House. Motion 4, slaughter capacity. That pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee undertake a study to determine what actions can be taken by the Government of Canada to ensure stability and increased slaughter capacity, as well as competitiveness in the regions of Quebec and Canada, with a view to increasing food safety, animal welfare, and reducing the environmental footprint of transportation. That the committee hold at least 4 meetings on this matter, that it hear witnesses in relation to this matter, and that the committee report its findings and recommendations to the House. So there I've read the motions, Mr. Chairman. And if we have consent, I'd now like to go to debate on motion 4. It has to do with the motion we heard from Mr. Lehoux. I think it's a complement to it. And earlier we heard from colleagues in the various parties saying that we might go into greater depth and study more in-depth processing. And I do believe that slaughter capacity in the regions is extremely significant and needs us to turn our attention to it. They need to be able to increase their capacity in order to be consistent with the government's regulations as to animal welfare and animal transportation, and with a view to the goals we have in terms of greenhouse gases. There are animals that are transported to Pennsylvania to be slaughtered there. And I think in order that we can transport less, it seems to me that this kind of thing is inconsistent. So I'd like to submit this to you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Perron.
Is that you're obviously going on notice that these are motions that you hope to consider. One thing that I have failed to mention so far is in the last Parliament, we had a very effective, albeit informal, but a very effective subcommittee group where we could come together and discuss these. It's not my position to say, but as I look around and look at some of the folks that are raising their hand, maybe this is a great opportunity for us to pull together a subcommittee in January to discuss the direction of where this committee will go beyond, of course, the technical briefings, really, that we have introduced from Mr. Barlow. I did see Mr. Barlow's hand followed by Mr. McGregor. Would you like to go ahead, Mr. Barlow?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. You pretty much said exactly what I was saying. Is I think all of us will have some ideas for initiatives that we want to bring up, and I don't have a problem with the ones that Mr. Perron has put forward, but I know Mr. McGregor will have some as well, as we will. So if I could suggest that we accept these notice of motion and bring these up as well as other ideas at our first subcommittee meeting in January or whenever you schedule that.
Mr. McGregor, and I do see Mr. Drouin's hand now as well.
Yeah, likewise, Mr. Chair. I'll accept these as the notices of the motion, and we just did pass routine motions which do specify a 48-hour notice period. So I too would, I think there's some great ideas here, but I'd just like to have a little bit of time to go over them, consider them, and but I'll accept these as the notice for today. Thank you.
Mr. Drouin?
I'll be very quick. What Mr. Barlow and what Mr. McGregor said, I agree.
Monsieur Perron? Monsieur Perron, c'est OK?
Mr. Perron, do you agree that we can discuss this in January? I mean, we can always have discussions, but if I've understood the general intention, I would propose that we debate number 4. Now, I've understood from my colleagues that they don't want to debate motion 4 today, but that they are favorable to it. Have I understood correctly? So I would ask for unanimous consent. I don't think we need to spend any more time on this today. But you know what I think.
Thank you, Mr. Perron. And I know from the 43rd Parliament that slaughterhouse capacity and processing is a major issue that you've raised as a member of Parliament and certainly as an advocate in Quebec. I don't want to speak for Mr. Barlow, Mr. McGregor, or Mr. Drouin. I don't know if it was complete unanimous consent on what has been put forward. I think perhaps an agreement that the motions that you've put forward have merit and are worthy of discussion. But I think it's important that we can come together and share our priorities, perhaps in a form such as a subcommittee, to be able to decide what we want to moving forward. But I don't want to presume for the other members of this House. I'll leave the floor open if anyone wants to opine.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'm not ready to give unanimous consent to start the study on number 4 at this time.
I'm seeing the same from Mr. McGregor and I believe Mr. Drouin. Monsieur Parent, je pense tous les membres de ce comité.
Mr. Parent, I believe all members of this committee understand how important processing is, especially in the regions. But this might be a conversation for the subcommittee in January. Is that all right by you? Thank you very much.
Look, seeing that we have our business laid out before us for at least next week for our meeting, and then certainly moving forward with the British Columbia work that Mr. Barlow had mentioned, what I would say is I'm happy to work with the clerk to organize a subcommittee with the vice chairs and Mr. McGregor and of course the representative on the government side to have these conversations. So I'll endeavor to work up and find a time for translation and that work. If there's nothing else to discuss, I would ask if there's a move to adjourn and to continue our work when we're able to line up our meeting with the PI potato issue. Okay. Second by Mr. McGregor. All those in favor?
Aye.
Yep. Okay. Thank you, everyone.